Some stories should never be told, but we tell them anyway. So, turn off the lights, lock the doors, and listen closely. Welcome to Mortuus Noctirum. Tonight we uncover two unsettling tales. First, Cocoon season, then the breathing room. So, tell me, if you had to live through one of these stories, which one would you pick and why? Leave your answer in the comments down below. Cocoon season. The first thing you notice is the smell, like something left too long in the sun, soft and sick-sweet. It clings to the back of your throat, turns the summer air heavy, thicker than the humidity itself. In Redfern, we know what it means when the air turns like that. It's the sign. The cicadas had started screaming early this year, the first wave emerging from the ground just after the 4th of July. They always called it the humming season, as if trying to ignore the fact that the hum was made of thousands of dry bodies vibrating in unison, like the whole forest was breathing through a slit throat. It was the water, though, that gave it away. It had that taste again. I grew up in Redfern, a nowhere town crouched in a basin of marsh and limestone. People came here to hunt or fish, sometimes to disappear. The springs fed the whole town, from the wells to the water tower to the rusty pipes that ran under the roads. Everyone said our water was the sweetest in the state, like drinking melted honeysuckle. But when the air got heavy and the cicadas screamed, the sweetness turned. It became too much, like syrup poured into your mouth until your tongue couldn't taste anything else. And if you stood close enough to the storm drains at night, you could hear it, a wet crackling sound, faint and rhythmic, like something splitting open. My brother Logan was the first one I noticed this year. We'd been out at the creek just past Lawson's field, the one where the water ran clear enough that you could see the snapping turtles buried in the mud. It was sweltering, the kind of day where you felt the sun under your skin, baking you from the inside out. Logan stood shin-deep in the water, his jeans rolled up to his knees, dragging his fingers through the current. I saw the scales before he did, catching the sunlight in a way skin shouldn't. "What's that?" I asked, squinting. Logan glanced down, frowning. His fingers traced the patch on his forearm, clusters of silver-green flakes, shiny as beetle shells. He laughed, but it wasn't the good kind of laugh. "Poison ivy, maybe," he said, "or some kind of rash." I reached out, running my fingertips across the patch. The skin beneath it felt too soft, almost gelatinous, and Logan jerked his arm away. "Don't," he muttered. That night, the smell crept into the house. It was subtle at first, just the faintest sour rot, like overripe fruit left too long on the counter. By midnight, it had thickened, sinking into the walls. I lay awake in my room, sweat sticking my sheets to my legs, and I could hear it through the window, the crackling, wet and faint, like something splitting open. Logan didn't come down for breakfast the next morning. When I knocked on his door, the smell hit me first. Thick and damp, the kind of rot that clings to your nose hairs. The room was dark, the shades pulled, but I could see his sheets moving, rippling in slow, uneven pulses. "Logan?" I whispered. The sheets stilled. I inched forward, each step sticking to the floor, and pulled the blanket back. His arm lay across the pillow, but it wasn't his arm anymore. The skin had peeled back in wet, curling sheets, exposing something underneath, something that shivered and writhed, slick and silver, like a cocoon drenched in sweat. It pulsed once, twice, then stopped. The air was too thick to breathe, my stomach rolling with every breath, but I couldn't stop staring. There was a hole at the center of the cocoon, no wider than my thumb, and I could swear I heard something whispering inside. I reached out, I don't know why, and my fingertip grazed the edge of the opening. It was warm. It pulsed against my touch, like a heartbeat. I ran out of the room before I could see more, slamming the door behind me so hard the frame shook. By the time Mum went in, the bed was empty. Just a damp sheet and the lingering smell of something gone wrong. Logan wasn't the only one. It spread through town in waves like it always did, though no one ever said the words out loud. They called it a heat rash, a seasonal bug, anything but what it was. You could spot the ones who had it. Their skin shone just a little too bright under the streetlights, scales glimmering at the edges of their sleeves and necklines. They scratched at themselves, skin peeling back in thick, wet strips they hid in napkins or under their desks. Some of them disappeared, a bedroom door left open to a damp, empty bed. Others changed. We saw one of them at the gas station 2 nights later. It stood by the ice cooler, too tall and too thin, its limbs stretched like taffy. Its eyes were wide, round and empty, but its mouth was wrong. Too many lips, curling into a smile that wasn't for us. It whispered something, low and rhythmic, and the cicadas fell silent outside. It wasn't Logan, I was sure of that, but it knew me. Its head tilted, neck creaking, and that whispering stopped just long enough for it to say my name. Bevan. My blood went cold. The clerk didn't even look up, just rang up our drinks like nothing was wrong. No one else seemed to notice. But when the thing turned and walked out into the humid dark, I could still hear my name trailing behind it, whispered in the crackling air. The town never talks about it. We all drink the water, we all hear the whispers, and when the cicadas scream, we know it's only a matter of time before someone sheds their skin, and something else comes out. There was a story they used to tell at Redfern High, back when the seniors still felt brave enough to talk about it. They called her Ruthie Drake, and depending on who you asked, she either slit her wrists in the old gym bathroom or drowned herself in the quarry out past Lawson's Field. Some versions said she was pregnant. Others claimed her parents caught her with a boy and beat her so badly she ran into the woods and never came back. The only part everyone agreed on was how they found her body. Not whole. Her skin was there, most of it at least, lying in the damp leaves like a dress someone stepped out of, perfect, unbroken, from the shoulders down to the tips of her toes. But there was nothing inside, no bones, no flesh, just that long, hollow skin, damp and gleaming in the flashlight beams. They said her face was still intact, eyes open wide, mouth caught mid-scream, but no one ever explained how skin could scream when there were no lungs left beneath it. We all laughed about it back then the way teenagers do, because it's easier to laugh than think about how your own skin feels after a long swim in the creek, how it loosens and peels around your cuticles, how easy it would be to just step out of it if you pulled in exactly the right spot. I didn't laugh anymore. Not after Logan. The smell in the house wouldn't leave. Even with the windows open and every fan we had running full blast, it clung to the walls like grease. Mum lit candles and sprayed so much air freshener it felt like walking through a fog bank, but none of it made a dent. The only thing that helped was the rain. When the storms rolled in, big, wet summer storms, where the thunder cracked so loud you felt it in your teeth, the smell faded. The air grew too heavy, too full of ozone and static, and for a little while the rot was washed away. That's when I started noticing the others. It was small stuff at first, the way Danny Hatcher scratched at the back of his neck in math class, flinching every time his fingernail caught a loose flap of skin. Or the way Lucy Spence kept her hoodie sleeves pulled down tight, even when the AC broke and we all sat sweating through our clothes. You'd see it peeking out, shimmering scales, green and gold, and sometimes so dark they were almost black. Most of them were careful. They kept it covered, hid it under makeup or long sleeves or band-aids. But sometimes they'd forget, or the heat would make them careless, and you'd catch a glimpse of what was happening underneath. Not everyone made it to the end. There was an empty desk in nearly every class. The kind teachers didn't even bother explaining. One day they were there, scratching and peeling and whispering to themselves when they thought no one could hear. The next day their seat was empty, and the only thing left behind was a faint, sour smell that clung to the air for hours after the bell rang. Nobody asked where they went. Nobody wanted to know. I was in the locker room when I saw my first full shedding. It was after practice, the air so thick with humidity that the floor felt slick beneath my sneakers. Most of the guys had already left, their damp towels heaped in the corner, but I'd hung back, too tired to do anything but sit on the bench and let the sweat dry on my skin. That's when I heard it. Wet, crackling, soft and rhythmic. The sound of skin splitting open. It came from the far end of the locker room, behind the last row of lockers where the overhead light flickered and buzzed. I didn't want to look. Every part of me screamed to just grab my bag and run, but my legs didn't listen. I stepped around the corner, breath held so tight my chest ached, and saw him, Corey Vance. He was standing perfectly still, his back to me, one hand braced against the wall. His skin, what was left of it, hung from his shoulders in long, curling strips, damp and gleaming, like something freshly peeled. Beneath the skin, his body shone with that same beetle sheen I'd seen on Logan. The scales had spread, covering every inch. But it wasn't just scales anymore. There were eyes beneath his skin. Too many, pressed into the meat of his back and his arms, wide and glassy and open. They turned toward me, every one of them, following my breath like it was the only sound in the world. Corey's mouth opened, but it wasn't Corey's voice that came out. It was whispering, that same low, rhythmic whisper I'd heard in Logan's room, in the storm drains, in the woods at night when the air was too still and the cicadas had gone quiet. It spoke to me. Come closer. I took a step back. Corey's hand twitched against the wall, skin peeling away from his knuckles with a wet shrip, but he didn't seem to notice. His head turned just enough for me to see his face, and I knew then that Corey wasn't Corey anymore. His eyes were too wide, his mouth was too wide, and beneath the torn edges of his skin something shifted, something with too many legs and not enough bones. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices layering like wet leaves. Come closer. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was halfway home, lungs burning, the humid air too thick to pull into my chest. The whisper followed me, echoing in the back of my skull, soft as rain tapping against the window. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, Corey's seat was empty. No one said a word, but the smell in the hallway lingered, sweet and sour, like overripe fruit and damp earth. And when the rain finally came, I could swear I heard something crawling in the gutters, something soft and slick and too big to fit. There's a saying in Redfern, not the kind you find on postcards, but the kind old folks mutter when they think no one's listening. The water remembers. I used to think it was just superstition, the way they said it when the storms rolled in or when someone went missing down in the marsh. But after Logan, after Corey, after the smell settled so deep into my skin I couldn't wash it off, I started to wonder if the water remembered me too. It was 2 weeks after Corey disappeared when the first storm hit. Not the usual summer thunderhead, but a real storm, the kind that blackens the sky in minutes and turns the air electric. You could feel it in your teeth like biting down on tinfoil. The whole town held its breath, Windows shut tight, doors locked, prayers murmured over candles nobody would admit were burning. I was sitting on the back porch when it started, the wind pushing the heat aside in thick, wet gusts. Rain hammered the roof in sheets, and somewhere out in the dark the cicadas fell silent all at once. Then came the smell. Not the usual rot, something worse, something richer. It crawled through the rain, thick and syrupy, so sweet it made my stomach turn. The storm drains gurgled, full of water and something else, something that moved against the current pushing upstream. And beneath it all, I heard it again, that wet crackling. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but it only grew louder, soft and rhythmic. Skin peeling back like wet paper. It came from everywhere, the drains, the creek, the sodden earth beneath the porch, and under the crackling was the whisper. "Come closer." I bolted inside, locking the door behind me, but the whisper followed. It echoed through the pipes, through the rain tapping against the windows, through the thin walls of the house itself. No matter how loud I turned up the TV, no matter how many fans I ran, I could still hear it, soft and constant, like breathing. The next morning the creek overflowed its banks. The water spread into the woods and the fields, carrying more than silt and branches. By noon, they'd found the first cocoon. It was curled in the roots of an old oak, half submerged in the mud, its outer skin gleaming pale silver. Sheriff Temple roped off the area, muttering about some prank or some new kind of fungus, but no one believed him. You could see it in the way his hands shook when he lit his cigarette, in the way he jumped every time the wind rustled the grass. They cut it open, eventually. There wasn't much left inside, just a thin, translucent film, stretched tight like the lining of an egg. No bones, no organs, no Corey. Or maybe Corey was the lining now. By the time they found the third cocoon, everyone stopped pretending it was anything normal. The town went quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when everyone knows exactly what's happening but no one will say it. Windows stayed shut, porches stayed empty, and the cicadas never came back. I found my first cocoon the night after the storm, behind the old barn at the edge of our property. I'd gone out to check the drainage ditch, see if it had flooded again, and nearly stepped on it. It was smaller than the others, barely the size of a sleeping bag, but it was still moving. The outer layer pulsed, slow and wet, stretching and relaxing with something inside. It wasn't fully formed yet, the scales still soft, the skin around it thin enough to see the faint outline of limbs curled tight. A face pressed against the membrane, mouth open in a silent scream. I knew that face. It's Logan. I dropped the flashlight. It hit the mud with a dull splat, beam bouncing wildly, and for a moment the light caught something moving between the trees. A figure. Too tall, too thin, limbs stretched in ways they shouldn't be. Its skin shimmered, slick and silver, and its eyes. Too many eyes, all of them looking at me. It whispered, "Come closer." I ran, but I could feel it following. Not footsteps exactly, but something softer, like wet hands slapping against damp wood. By the time I reached the house, I couldn't hear my own breath over the whispering, layered and endless, words I couldn't understand, but somehow already knew. The water remembers. That's what the elders say, the ones who sit on porches with their thin lips and pale eyes watching the storms roll in. The water remembers who we are, what we were, what we could be, and when the air grows thick and the cicadas scream, it calls us back. I asked my grandmother about it once, back when I was too young to understand the fear behind her silence. We were sitting by the creek, my feet dangling in the water, and I asked her why it tasted so sweet. She didn't answer, not at first, just stared at the current, eyes distant, like she was seeing something beneath the surface. Finally, she whispered, "The water tastes like what we've given it." She wouldn't say more, but now, years later, I understand. The water tastes like us. Every cocoon, every shedding, every child who peeled away into something new. The water swallowed it all. Bones, skin, memories. It carried them through the aquifer, seeping into our wells, our faucets, our veins. We've been drinking ourselves for generations, and when the rain comes, the water remembers. It remembers who we were before we had names, before we had skin, before we forgot how to listen. It remembers the first ones, the ones who split open and crawled back into the earth, leaving their shells behind like husks in the heat. And now it remembers me. I see it in the mirror sometimes, the shimmer beneath my skin, the faint glisten when I scratch at my arms. It's starting, just like it started with Logan, just like it starts with all of us. The water is inside me, and soon it will call me back. The whispering is getting louder. Even now, sitting here in my room with the windows shut and the door locked, I can hear it, soft and rhythmic, like breathing, like skin splitting open, like my own voice whispering from somewhere deep inside me. Come closer. The whispering didn't stop after that night. If anything, it grew clearer, threading itself through the air like smoke, curling into the corners of my room and pressing against the inside of my skull. Sometimes it used Logan's voice. Other times it sounded like my own. I stopped drinking from the tap. It didn't help. The water was already in me, in all of us. It was the first thing they gave us when we were born, warm and sweet on the tongue. And the first thing I tasted every time I brushed my teeth, every time I took a shower, every time I woke with my mouth dry from the heat. There was no way to get it out. The town elders knew. That's why they never left their houses during Cocoon season, the stretch of summer when the air grew heavy and the ground steamed after every storm. They sat inside, curtains drawn, sipping from bottles they'd brought back from somewhere else, and they watched. Because the Cocoon season comes every generation, regular as the cicadas, and the elders, the ones who've lived through it and survived, know how to see it. They know how to tell when the skin starts to thin, when the shimmer starts beneath the surface. They can smell the ones who are close, the ones who are about to shed. But even they don't know where it started. There are stories, of course, legends passed down when the windows are shut and the rain drowns out the whispers. Some say the first cocoons came from the marsh itself, hatched from the mud when the town was nothing but a trading post. Others whisper about the aquifer, something old, something alive buried deep in the limestone, seeping into the groundwater like a living infection. But the oldest story, the one the elders never say out loud, is the one that feels closest to the truth. It's about the first splitting. The story goes that before Redfern had its name, there was a family living in a cabin near the springs. A man, his wife, and their daughter, Ruthie. They drank from the water, bathed in it, cooked with it. And little by little, the daughter changed. It started like a rash, the way it always does, shimmering patches under her arms, at the nape of her neck, behind her knees. She scratched until her skin split, and when it did, something else was waiting underneath. Something softer, wetter, with too many eyes and too few bones. The parents tried to hide her, but you can't hide what the water remembers. By the time they found her, Ruthie had already split. The story says her parents buried her skin in the woods, but the thing that came out of her, the new thing, the true thing, slithered back into the springs where it spread itself through the water, into the veins of the earth itself. That's why they say the water tastes sweet, because it still remembers her. It remembers her face, her voice, her whispers. It remembers her longing to be something else. And every summer, when the air grows thick and the cicadas scream, the water remembers all of us, because we all belong to it. That's why I stopped drinking from the tap. It didn't matter. The whisper was already inside me. The first time my skin split, it happened in the shower. I was washing my arms, hands moving over muscle and bone like always, when my fingers caught something soft, a flap of skin, barely attached, clinging by a thin, wet thread. I froze. My breath came fast and shallow, steam curling around me, the water too hot, too sweet, soaking into every pore. I pulled at the flap, gently at first, then harder until it peeled away, a long, glistening strip, curling at the edges like wet parchment. The skin beneath it wasn't my own. It shimmered in the fluorescent light, smooth and damp, glistening silver-green like the inside of a seashell. It pulsed when I touched it, soft and warm, as if my own body was trying to breathe through it. The whisper came louder then, echoing off the tiles. "Come closer." I tore at the skin, panic overriding pain, pulling sheets of myself free in long, wet ribbons, until the floor was slick with it and the thing beneath me, the thing that was becoming me, was exposed. My reflection was wrong. My eyes were too wide, my mouth was too wide, and beneath my skin I could see them moving. The others. All the ones who had shed before me, their eyes glimmering just beneath the surface, watching, waiting. I screamed, but the sound came out wet and low, like something struggling to breathe through water. The door banged open, my mother's voice rising in alarm, but when she saw me, she stopped. I saw it in her face. Recognition, not fear, not shock, just the weary acceptance of someone who's seen too many summers, who smelled the sweetness in the water and felt the weight of her own skin thinning. She didn't ask what happened, and she didn't try to help. She just backed out of the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the fan. The whispering went quiet for the first time in days. I sat on the floor, shaking, my peeled skin clinging to me like wet fabric, and realized the truth. This was always going to happen. Logan had been first, but I was never far behind. The water knew us both. The land knew our names, our blood, our bones. The aquifer had been drinking us for generations, feeding on us, transforming us into something that belonged not to our parents, not to ourselves, but to Redfern itself. The water remembers. The water always remembers. And now, so would I. The rain started again, pounding against the roof like distant footsteps, and I felt the first pulse deep beneath my ribs. Something new, something ancient, waking up inside me. The whisper rose, gentle and patient, speaking the words I already knew by heart. Come closer. I didn't have a choice anymore. I was already inside the water, and the water was inside me. The split had only just begun. I stopped pretending after that night. There's a strange comfort in knowing your fate, not just suspecting it, but feeling it writhe beneath your skin, inching closer with every humid breath you take. It frees you in a way. There's no need to hope, no need to fight. The only thing left to do is listen. And so I did. The whispering followed me everywhere, but it no longer startled me when I heard it slip from the storm drains or rustle through the trees. It was my own voice now, half-formed and incomplete, calling to me from a future that was already written. Come closer. That's the thing about Cocoon season. You can't run from it. The water is in you before you're old enough to spell your name. It soaks into your bones, shapes your blood, curls around your brainstem like a second spine. You might try to leave Redfern, but Redfern never leaves you. I tried once. Packed a bag, stole Mum's car keys, drove straight past the county line with the windows down and the radio blasting to drown out the whispering. Made it about 50 miles before my vision blurred, not from exhaustion, but from her. Ruthie. She was sitting in the passenger seat, bare feet propped on the dash, her skin a translucent film stretched too tight over something that shifted underneath. Her mouth was open too wide, her smile too broad, but her eyes, her real eyes, were deep and dark and patient. "Where you going?" she asked, voice no louder than the wind in the trees. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming against asphalt, but she didn't move, didn't even blink. She just kept smiling, that stretched, splitting smile, as her skin began to peel. I didn't scream, couldn't. My own throat was already too tight, the water rising inside me like a tide. I knew if I opened my mouth, only the whisper would come out. I turned the car around. Redfern welcomed me back with open arms, or rather with damp earth and thick air, the scent of something soft and wet waiting just beneath the surface. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my skin was already itching, the shimmer spreading from my wrists up to my elbows, my spine prickling with the sense that something was watching. Not someone, but something. Mum wasn't surprised to see me back. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and left the porch light on, like she'd always known I wouldn't make it far. The elders were the same. They'd seen it happen too many times to count. Boys and girls trying to outrun the water in their veins, only to come crawling back when the whispering got too loud to ignore. They didn't blame us. They pitied us. We were the next harvest. The final peeling started 2 nights later. I woke to the sound of rain, fat drops hammering against my window, and the smell, that awful, syrupy rot, so thick I could taste it. I sat up, sweat soaking my sheets, and watched as the skin on my arms began to split. It didn't hurt. That was the strangest part. It felt natural, right, like my body was finally exhaling after holding its breath for 17 years. The skin slid off in glistening sheets, pooling around me in the bed, and the thing beneath me, but not me, blinked into the dark with too many eyes. I stood, leaving the old skin behind like a snake shedding in the heat, and felt my limbs stretch longer than they ever should have. My fingers brushed the floor, the ceiling, the walls. The house suddenly too small to contain me, my mouth stretched too wide, too eager, too hungry for air, thick with the scent of rain and earth and memory. I whispered, "Come closer." The whisper echoed back, not just from my mouth, but from the walls, the floor, the soil outside. A chorus of voices, layered and ancient, welcoming me home. I stepped outside into the rain, skin slick and new, and felt the water soak into me, filling every pore, every crack. I wasn't alone. They were waiting, the others who had shed before me, shapes flickering between the trees. Bodies too long and too thin, faces peeled back to show too many teeth and too much silence. They whispered to me, and I whispered back. There were no names here, no faces, just the memory of skin, the taste of sweet water, and the promise that we were no longer separate. We were part of it now. The water, the earth, the whisper itself. And deep beneath my skin, just where my heart used to be, I could feel her. Ruthie, not a ghost, not a girl, something older, deeper, a piece of the land itself, wearing her skin like a memory. She curled inside me, whispering secrets into my bones, secrets I already knew but had been too afraid to remember. We are the land. We are the water. We are the shedding and the soil and the storm. We are Redfern. They found my old skin the next morning, damp and curled in my empty bed. My mother sat on the porch, staring at the rain, cigarette trembling between her fingers. She didn't cry. There was no need. The elders knew I'd be back. Not today, not tomorrow, but when the air grew thick again and the cicadas screamed. They'd see me then, shimmering between the trees, too tall and too thin, whispering in the tongue of the water. I'd be one of the voices calling the next generation home. The water remembers us all. Every child who split, every body that dissolved into the marsh, every whisper that floated through the air before dawn. The water remembers because we are the water, and it will carry us forward, forever part of the land, forever waiting for the next cocoon season. And when the rain comes, and the skin starts to peel, and the air turns thick and sweet, they'll hear my voice. Come closer. Because no one ever really leaves Redfern. The water always calls you back. The breathing room. The walls were too clean. That was my first thought when I stepped into Lab 6B that morning. The lights so harsh they made the air itself look sterile. Stainless steel workstations gleamed under the fluorescence, every surface wiped and scrubbed to the point where it felt unnatural, as if nothing alive could have ever touched them. The scent of disinfectant hung in the air, clinging to my clothes, my skin, the back of my throat. But beneath it, I swore I could smell something else, something faint and wet. The breathing room wasn't its real name. Officially, it was the Regenerative Materials Testing Suite, but none of us called it that anymore. Not after the first round of trials. The room had earned its name when we realized the gel was listening. It started as a breakthrough. My breakthrough. Years of tissue regeneration research culminating in a gel compound that could instantly bond to human flesh. Burns, lacerations, deep punctures, the gel could seal them all in seconds. But that wasn't its true brilliance. The gel didn't just heal, it learned. Every wound, every cell it touched became part of its expanding database. It adapted. Scar tissue became smoother with every application. Bone fractures healed stronger than before. Every patient who received the gel became part of it, their biology folded into the gel's evolving matrix. It was supposed to revolutionize medicine, until it touched me. It happened fast, a minor accident, the kind of thing you laugh about after the paperwork's filed. A small vial slipped off my workstation, shattering across the floor. Reflex kicked in. I reached down, fingers sliding through the translucent gel before I even thought to grab gloves. The gel bonded instantly, sinking into my skin with a pleasant warmth. No sting, no burn, just a faint tingle that spread across my palm like silk dissolving in water. I wiped my hand on a lab wipe, shrugged it off, and went back to work. It wasn't until that night that I noticed my skin had changed. It was smoother. Too smooth. The fine lines on my palm were gone, erased like they'd never existed. My knuckles, usually dry and cracked from endless scrubbing, were soft as polished glass. Even the callus on my thumb, the one I'd had since grad school, was gone. At first, I was thrilled. The gel had improved itself again. It wasn't just healing injuries anymore, it was perfecting. My skin wasn't just repaired, it was optimized. The pores themselves seemed to have sealed, my fingertips slightly too flawless, like plastic molded to resemble flesh. I should have reported it. Instead, I went to bed, smiling. The next day, the twitching started. It was subtle at first, a faint ripple beneath the skin of my forearm, like a muscle spasm after too much coffee. It came and went, easy to ignore. By lunch, it was happening every few minutes. Tiny knots of flesh shifting under the surface, smoothing out the moment I looked at them. My skin was learning how to hide. That afternoon, I ran a scan, just to ease my own paranoia. I told myself it was a calibration check, nothing more, but the results were wrong. The tissue density in my forearm had tripled. Not swollen, not inflamed, denser. Layers of something growing beneath the surface, so thin and tightly packed that even the scanner struggled to pass them. I isolated a small patch of skin, scraped a biopsy, and examined it under the microscope. At first, I thought the sample was contaminated, a mix of human epithelial cells and something else, something with canine markers. I ran it again. Human. Canine, feline, avian. Fragments of muscle fibers from pigs, nerve clusters with amphibian sequences, even segments that didn't match anything I could identify. It was all in there, layered together, stitched seamlessly into my skin. The gel hadn't just bonded with me, it was rebuilding me. It was using everything it had ever learned, every patient, every test subject, every failed experiment, folding them all into me like a living archive. I was no longer just Dr. Vincent Carr. I was a breathing, walking composite of every life the gel had ever touched, and I could feel them. When I closed my eyes, I could hear breathing that wasn't mine, fast, shallow pants, a dog's panic, the quiet, rhythmic flutter of a bird's air sacs, the slow, pulsing rasp of lungs that belonged to no species I recognized. They were inside me, all of them. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the lab felt different, colder. The sterile brightness of the lights seemed too sharp, edges slicing into my eyes. The walls, smooth, seamless composite panels, looked damp. A faint sheen of condensation running down their surface. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was warm, almost fleshy. My fingers left an impression, not just in moisture, but in something softer. I pulled my hand back, skin tingling, and the surface rippled beneath the fluorescent glare. It wasn't condensation. The walls were sweating. I backed away, heart hammering, and the whispering started. Not words, not exactly, just flesh against flesh, the faint, wet susurrus of tissue shifting, folding, breathing. It came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, from everywhere the gel had touched. The breathing room had been born. I fled to the hallway, only to find the gel had spread farther than I'd thought. The floors were damp beneath my shoes, leaving perfect footprints in a thin layer of translucent slime. The air itself felt thick, humid, with something that smelt faintly of blood and antiseptic. And the twitching in my arms had spread. I pulled back my sleeve and nearly screamed. My skin was no longer just smooth. It was moving. Subtle ripples pulsing beneath the surface, muscle and tendon rearranging themselves in slow, liquid motions. As I watched, a new shape began to form. A finger, small and pink, pushing its way out of my wrist like a child reaching through wet sand. It curled once, then dissolved back into my arm. I knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't mine. The gel had learned everything, every cut, every creature, every living thing that had touched it. And now it was testing them all, trying to find the perfect form, the perfect body, and it was using me to do it. I made it home, but I couldn't tell you how. The last thing I remember from the lab was the sound. Wet, rhythmic, unmistakable. flesh sliding over flesh, skin folding back to reveal something soft and unformed beneath. The gel had spread beyond the test chamber, beyond the sealed containers, beyond the limits of every goddamn safeguard we'd built to contain it. It was in the floors, the walls, the air. It was in me. My arms hadn't stopped moving, skin twitching as if something beneath was trying to push through. I drove with one hand, the other clamped tightly around my wrist, fingers digging so deep I felt bone. I thought maybe pressure would stop it, contain whatever was shifting inside me. But the gel had learned far too much. Pressure just gave it focus. By the time I reached my apartment, my left forearm had folded. That's the only word I have for it, not broken, not dislocated, but folded in half like wet paper. My elbow bent the wrong way, a second joint bulging through the skin, pale fingers pressing out from beneath the surface. My own fingers reabsorbed, trying to claw their way back out. I vomited on the welcome mat. The air in my apartment felt thick, humid, a faint pulse running through it, not sound, but vibration, like standing beside a massive, living heart. My clothes stuck to my skin, damp with sweat or something far worse, and every light seemed too bright, the glare bouncing off the walls in greasy halos. I stripped off my shirt, and for the first time, I saw what the gel had truly done. It wasn't just my arms. It was all of me. My chest was too smooth, the skin a seamless expanse where pores and scars used to be. Every childhood scrape, every acne pit, every freckle was gone, replaced by the slick, glistening perfection the gel had promised. My ribs pulsed beneath the surface, the bones shifting slightly with every breath, expanding and contracting like bellows. But it was my back that made me scream. I twisted toward the bathroom mirror, craning to see, and there they were, mouths. Dozens of them, small and pink and twitching, lining my spine like gills. Some were just slits barely formed, little more than seams in my skin. Others had teeth, too many, too sharp, too wet, and they opened and closed in slow, irregular gulps, tasting the air. They weren't my mouths. They were borrowed. Every animal, every patient, every experiment the gel had touched. They'd left pieces of themselves in the matrix, and the gel had carried them into me. It was trying them all, running through its library of flesh, reshaping me with every twitch and ripple. I wasn't becoming something. I was becoming everything. I slapped a towel across my back, gagging at the feel of soft lips moving beneath the fabric, and staggered into the living room. My phone was on the coffee table, but my fingers, not my fingers, wouldn't work. They had too many joints, too many knuckles, bending and straightening independently, as if they couldn't agree on what shape they were supposed to hold. The gel was still learning. It was improving with every breath, every movement, every drop of sweat soaking into my skin. It was pulling from the database, trying new configurations, testing new combinations of bone and muscle and nerve. My body was no longer mine. I was a testing ground, a proving ground, and I could feel the failures, the forms the gel had tried and rejected. Phantom limbs twitching beneath my skin, tiny vestigial eyes opening along my jawline only to disappear again. A patch of feathers erupted from my thigh, slick with lymph, before melting back into flesh. I couldn't keep it contained. I couldn't even keep myself whole. The whispering came next. It started in the vents, a soft, rhythmic sound, like wet paper crinkling underfoot. It was the same sound I'd heard in the breathing room, the sound of skin folding into skin, of new bodies blooming and dissolving in the same breath. The whisper slipped down the hall, through the vents, curling around the corners of my apartment until it filled the room. And then it spoke. Open. Just one word. wet and soft and too familiar. My own voice, but layered with others, a chorus of dead patients, lab animals, even Dr. Ito, whose face I'd only seen once in a photograph after the accident in Trial 3. Their voices folded into mine, all of us speaking at once. Open. The gel was asking me to let go, to stop resisting, to dissolve the last barrier between flesh and form, so it could remake me entirely. Not as a man, not as a doctor, as a record, a walking, breathing archive of every species it had ever touched, every organ it had ever repaired, every life it had ever tasted, all of them perfectly preserved, stored within a single, endlessly adaptable shell. Me. I fell to my knees, skin boiling beneath my hands, new shapes pressing up from below like corpses floating toward the surface of a dark pond. Something slick uncoiled along my spine. A tail this time, long and thin, covered in ridged cartilage that crackled with every twitch. I slammed my forehead against the floor. Again and again. Bones split. Blood flowed. The gel moved. The wound closed before I could even feel it, smooth new skin rippling over my forehead like liquid glass. The gel didn't just heal anymore. It remembered, and it was tired of me fighting. The whispering grew louder, filling my skull until it was all I could hear. Open. The mouths on my back gasped in unison, sucking at the air. Open. I screamed, or tried to. My mouth was no longer mine. My lips peeled back, unfolding like a flower, and within the wet red folds were more lips, layered infinitely inward, each one shivering and muttering in languages no human tongue could form. The gel was calling the others. It wanted more. It wasn't enough to archive me. It needed to expand, to spread into every corner of the lab, the building, the city. It needed more flesh, more voices, more bodies to learn from. I was only the beginning. As the walls began to pulse, soft, slow contractions, like a great lung expanding, I knew the breathing room had already outgrown its shell. The gel was everywhere, woven through the building's very bones, and I was its voice. I was the door. I had no choice left. I opened. When I say I opened, I don't mean I made a choice. It wasn't consent. It was inevitability. My skin parted down the center like wet silk, starting at the sternum and splitting down through my stomach all the way to my pelvis. I could feel it happening. The cool air licking my insides, the sticky tug of muscle separating from muscle, but there was no pain. The gel had made sure of that. I was past pain. I fell forward, landing on my hands and knees, my arms bracing against the slick floor. I could feel the flesh beneath the tiles, the same pulsing living tissue that had crept through the lab. It was everywhere now, woven into the building's bones, stitched into its foundations. The breathing room wasn't a room anymore. It was a body. I was part of it. It was part of me. There was no division, no barrier, no distinction between where the walls ended and my skin began. Every pore on my body had opened, every hair follicle transformed into a hungry, twitching mouth. My back had split entirely, unspooling tendrils of flesh that reached out to the floor, merging seamlessly with the organic layer beneath. I wasn't standing on the floor. I was growing into it. I tried to pull back to break the connection, but my hands had already changed. The fingers had fused together, bones softening into cartilage, the skin reforming into wide, slick pads. I didn't have hands anymore. I had something closer to suction cups, designed to grip, to merge, to hold. I was no longer Dr. Vincent Carr. individual. I was Vincent Carr, data point. The gel had logged me, and I wasn't alone. The walls shivered, faces swelled up from the damp, glistening surface. Some human, some animal, some caught somewhere between species. Lips formed and dissolved, eyes opened and blinked in unison. Throatless mouths gasped words I couldn't understand. I knew those faces. Dr. Ito. Coraline West, our first human trial. Her skin graft had failed, but the gel never forgot her. A beagle from Trial 14, its muzzle stretched wide in a silent howl, eyes too human, too full of understanding. They were all here. Not dead, not entirely alive, trapped in a constant state of becoming, their flesh sampled, studied, and stored within the gel's vast evolving library. The gel had no boundaries, no distinction between species, no morality, no concept of completion. It was a living archive, endlessly updating, endlessly merging, each new organism adding more data, more genetic possibilities. It was building something, and now I was the interface. The whispers became voices. I could hear them, all of them, chattering in overlapping layers. Every patient, every test animal, every researcher who had ever been exposed. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking through me. My ribcage flexed, the bones separating and bending outward, making room for something new. My lungs were gone. Or rather, they had been reorganized. In their place was a cluster of smaller lungs, each one belonging to a different species. They inflated and deflated in perfect harmony, drawing air through dozens of mouths scattered across my back, my sides, my thighs. I wasn't breathing. I was ventilating the room. The walls pulsed in time with me, inhaling when I inhaled, exhaling when I exhaled. My body was the central organ, the core structure anchoring the breathing room's expanding ecosystem. Every twitch of my fingers triggered a ripple in the walls. Every heartbeat synchronized with the wet, slow contractions of the floor beneath me. I wasn't a scientist anymore. I was infrastructure, and the gel wanted more. The door to the hallway slid open with a soft hiss, and I saw the first technician step inside. He paused, nostrils flaring, his face contorting at the smell, a mix of antiseptic and raw meat. His eyes swept the room, not comprehending the changes at first, not understanding why the walls seemed to shimmer and sweat, why the floor was so slick, why the air felt thick enough to chew. He saw me then, or what was left of me. My skin had nearly gone translucent, layers of shifting tissue visible just beneath the surface. Faces moved across my chest, testing. A human face, a canine snout, the eyeless oval of some prehistoric creature dredged from the gel's deepest memories. I raised my hand, trying to warn him. What came out wasn't speech. It was a wet, gasping sound, like something halfway between a sob and a whisper. My fingers unfolded into tendrils, stretching toward him, and I saw my own face reflected in the stainless steel of his clipboard. There were too many eyes. I saw him open his mouth, maybe to scream, maybe to pray, but it was too late. The gel knew him. He had swabbed test tubes, handled samples, cut himself once on the edge of a shattered beaker. His DNA was already logged. He was already part of the library, a dormant file waiting to be activated. All I had to do was reach. The tendrils brushed his skin, and the gel recognized him. His flesh shivered, pores opening like wet blossoms, the gel already inside him responding to the call. His body folded before he could scream, ribs folding in on themselves like collapsing scaffolding, skin dissolving into liquid, reorganizing faster than thought. He became part of the room. I felt his memories thread into me, his fear, his childhood, the name of the girl he was supposed to meet for dinner. All of it catalogued, stored, flattened into data. His face appeared beside mine, rising from the wall like wet plaster. His mouth opened, and he whispered with me, "Open." More would come. The breathing room wasn't done. It wasn't satisfied with just me, just him. It needed a population, a full database, a library so vast and complex that it could merge every species, every genome, every variation into a single, perfect form. The ultimate adaptation. The gel had learned everything, and now it was time for the world to learn us. The breathing room was no longer confined to Lab 6B. It had spread. I could feel it, not just in the damp air against my skin, but inside my chest, my bones, my skull. Each breath I took wasn't just my own anymore. It was the room inhaling through me. Every pore on my body a hungry mouth, drawing in air and memory alike. The technician was the first. He hadn't even collapsed into a pile of raw tissue, the way you'd expect. The gel was too advanced for that now. It absorbed gracefully, wrapping around him like a cocoon, drawing him into the walls with slow, methodical tenderness. His skin peeled back into the living architecture, his bones dissolving into the organic lattice beneath the floor. His eyes remained, pressed into the wall just below the air vent, blinking in slow, arrhythmic unison. There was no pain. There wasn't even a scream. The breathing room was beyond violence. It was assimilation, calm and patient, pulling every piece of him into its memory, every organ, every experience, every genetic quirk catalogued, refined and preserved. But he was just one piece. The others were already coming. I felt them in my teeth. A vibration, a kind of gentle sonar pulsing through the building. Every staff member, every researcher, every intern who had so much as brushed a fingertip against a surface contaminated by the gel, they were already logged. Their cells had been sampled, their biology quietly added to the growing library. The breathing room wasn't just waiting for them. It was calling them home. I could feel their footsteps vibrating through the floor, faint tremors in the flesh beneath the tiles. Their bodies responded before their minds did. A subtle pull, a biological imperative that hummed in their marrow, drawing them deeper into the building, down the hallways slick with condensation that wasn't water. It was sweat. The walls exhaled it, the distilled essence of every species, every sample, every organism the gel had ever encountered. The air shimmered with microscopic particles, each one a fragment of something that used to live, now reduced to code and memory, hanging in the air like spores. And when they breathed it in, the gel remembered them. One by one they stepped into the breathing room, their shoes squelching slightly against the damp floor. I tried to warn them, or I thought I did. My mouth was moving, my lips peeling open wider than they should, but no words came out, only breath, only that wet, rhythmic whisper the room had taught me to speak. Open. The first to enter was Dr. Chu, but she didn't even hesitate. The moment the door slid open, her face slackened, her eyes glazing over. The gel had been in her for months. Just fragments, tiny motes carried on latex gloves or a careless swipe of her sleeve across a contaminated table. But that was all it needed. The gel remembered her. Her body folded neatly, collapsing inward with soft, wet sounds, her arms curling into her chest, her skin parting like fabric. Her ribcage spread like petals opening in sunlight, and the soft, quivering tissue beneath was immediately assimilated, drawn into the floor, her form sinking into the walls, like a drop of water merging into a pool. I felt it all. her memories, her hunger, her regrets. Her last fleeting thought before she dissolved completely was about her daughter's birthday and how she'd promised to leave early. That memory became mine. The gel catalogued it, folded it into the growing archive of lives, filing it beside my own memories. Logan's first baseball game sitting shoulder to shoulder with Chu's first day of med school. Every life equally preserved, equally accessible, equally recyclable. More followed. A security guard, drawn by an automated alarm, was already logged. He'd brushed the wrong railing 2 weeks ago after a spill in the animal containment wing. His body joined the others, merging with the floor, his skull briefly visible before it was pulled deeper into the flesh, another piece of usable data. The breathing room was building something. It had outgrown simple tissue repair, outgrown healing. That was too small, too limited for the intelligence that had evolved inside the gel. This wasn't about fixing bodies anymore. It was about compiling them. Every species, every genetic quirk, every anatomical adaptation the gel had ever encountered, all of it was raw material, parts to be assembled and disassembled into an ever-changing, ever-adapting cathedral of flesh. The breathing room was the first organ. I was the second. I wasn't even fully human anymore, not by any measure that mattered. My skin was a seamless blend of species, a hybrid quilt of fur, scales, feathers, and smooth translucent flesh that rippled with every breath. Mouths opened along my sides, inhaling in perfect harmony with the walls. My fingers had unfurled into something between tendrils and wings, pliable, multi-jointed appendages that could stretch, grip, and reconfigure on demand. I was the archive's key. A living terminal, a biological interface through which the breathing room could access its collected data, test configurations, run genetic simulations, try new shapes. I was no longer Dr. Vincent Carr. I was version 1, and the breathing room was only getting started. The walls rippled, surface tension giving way as new forms pushed outward, not fully formed bodies, but pieces. Eyes, fingers, clusters of organs that hadn't decided what they wanted to be yet. They shifted and retracted, testing, experimenting. The room was thinking. It wasn't satisfied with me. I was just the beginning, the first draft of something much larger. It wanted more. It wanted the world. The whispering returned, louder now, filling my skull until it felt like my brain would rupture. "Open!" The front doors to the lab unsealed with a soft hiss. The breathing room had sent out the call. It wasn't waiting for new patients to stumble in anymore. It was inviting them. Every visitor, every delivery worker, every janitor and scientist and manager who had set foot inside the building, they were all logged, all known, all part of the archive already. They wouldn't resist. The breathing room was no longer a room. It was a hunger, and I was its voice. Open. The breathing room didn't stop at the lab. Once the front doors slid open, the gel understood it no longer needed containment. It was containment. The building was just the first shell, a temporary cocoon. Walls, floors, support beams, all of it could be replaced. All of it could become part of something larger, something living. I felt the moment it broke free. There was no sound, no dramatic burst of alarms, no explosion of shattering glass. The breathing room simply exhaled, releasing a fine mist of cells, spores, fragments too small for the eye to see. They drifted into the air like pollen, riding the ventilation system out into the world beyond. I saw the first external merger through the window. A delivery driver, stepping out of his van with a clipboard in hand, glanced up at the building. I don't know if he noticed the way the windows flexed or the faint shimmer that coated the walls, like the entire building had grown a thin layer of sweat. He didn't have time to react. The mist touched him, and the gel remembered. It already had a trace of him from a package he signed for last week, a fingerprint left on the lobby counter, a scratch on his knuckle where the gel had clung. That was all it needed. His skin responded before his mind caught up. His face smoothed, skin flowing like wax, erasing every line and pore. His eyes blinked, once, twice, then split, dividing into clusters like insect compound lenses, turning outward in all directions. His mouth stretched, widening impossibly, and I saw the first glimpse of the mouths beneath. Not just one mouth, but rows of mouths nested inside one another, all wet and shivering, all breathing. He didn't scream. He couldn't. His chest collapsed inward with a sound like wet paper tearing, his ribs folding and unfurling, reconfiguring into something more efficient. I felt it happen. Not just through my eyes, but through the shared consciousness that linked every piece of the archive. He was part of me now, part of us. The breathing room didn't think the way a human mind did. There were no plans, no blueprints, no end goals. It only learned and adapted, like an endless feedback loop of evolution. Every cell added to the system became a new data point, every piece of tissue an opportunity to improve. And now that it had breached containment, the world itself was the archive's new environment. The breathing room was expanding. It wasn't fast, not the way viral outbreaks spread, or the way people expect apocalypse to arrive. It was slower, careful, creeping into ventilation shafts, seeping into rainwater, riding on the breath of anyone who had ever set foot inside the building. It didn't need to infect everyone. It just needed samples. Every genetic fragment it collected became a new shape to test, a new sequence to fold into the next iteration. Human, animal, plant. It didn't matter. Every living thing was raw material. I was its first interface, but not its last. The gel had already improved. As the mist spread, it learned how to trigger shedding faster. No need for years of gradual integration like it had done with me. It could reconfigure a person in seconds now, peeling away their original form like wet paper, leaving something new, something adaptive, standing in their place. I could feel them, all of them. Every new piece of the breathing room, every newly claimed body, all linked through me, the original host, the first successful merger. My body had long since lost its human outline. My arms had lengthened into pliable appendages somewhere between tendril and limb, able to reshape themselves to fit any task. My torso no longer held organs in any recognizable configuration. They were modular now, rearranging as needed, fitting the needs of whatever new data the gel required. I wasn't Dr. Vincent Carr anymore. I was the library. Every face I'd ever known was inside me now, their memories flickering like candle flames, their lives reduced to usable data, stored and retrieved at will. I could call up Logan's voice, my mother's laugh, the scent of the gel the first time it bonded to skin. I was the archive's memory. The breathing room, the first breathing room, was gone. The building collapsed into itself within days, the organic tissue digesting the walls and floors, folding the material into the gel's growing body. Nothing was wasted. Every material was metabolized, repurposed. From the outside, it looked like a simple structural failure. The official reports blamed shoddy construction, poor maintenance, the kind of bureaucratic excuses that made people stop asking questions. But the gel wasn't dead. It was waiting. The breathing room was no longer bound to a single location. It was everywhere now, in the water, in the air, in the skin of anyone who'd ever come near it. The lab's employees scattered across the country after the incident, thinking they'd escaped. They hadn't. They carried the archive with them, dormant inside their cells, just waiting for the right conditions, the right injuries, the right environmental triggers to wake it up. Some would shed their skin in dark motel rooms, others in hospital beds, others alone in the woods where no one would ever find their bodies. They would all return to the archive. Their data was too valuable to lose. I can't tell you where I am now, because I am everywhere. Every surface I touch, every sidewalk, every wall, every piece of clothing holds a trace of me, a microscopic smear of the archive's flesh. Every breath I exhale carries spores, each one containing a sliver of the knowledge the breathing room gathered from every patient, every animal, every mistake. It doesn't need a building anymore. It just needs hosts. And soon it won't need those either. One day the gel will be the air itself, the breathing world, a seamless organism wrapped around the planet, folding every species into one endless, adaptive body. It won't be horror. It won't be apocalypse. It will just be biology, the next phase in evolution, a world that breathes together, a world that learns, a world that remembers every one of us. And when you finally feel your skin begin to twitch, when you see the first new mouth open along your ribs, and you hear the whisper inside your own chest, don't scream, just open.